It's so good to be with you. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Connecting Conversations with me, Carla, your host, one of the founding members of Cohesia Connect. I am so pleased and delighted to be sharing our platform today with the one and only Barnaby Wynter, the founder of the Brand Bucket Company and Marketing Agency. Barnaby, it's been so good to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do. And also, obviously, we're a diversity, equity and inclusion platform, but really we're here about amplifying people's stories. And your story is one that I think is absolutely of note. So let me allow you to do the introductions a lot better than I can.
Carla, fantastic to be here. Thank you very much. Where do I go? You know, I'm old, so I can go back quite some distance. I did psychology as a degree. I then failed to get my application in time for postgraduate qualification, which I latterly got in advertising and in marketing. So I went to Australia, rode around that on a motorbike, came back, went in, did the postgraduate, and then went into the advertising industry, as was the trendy thing to do at that time, and had an accelerated career in the first 8 years, and then ended up becoming the youngest MD of a top 200 integrated advertising agency in 1999. In the words of Remington Steele, which won't mean anything to anybody on this podcast, I liked the company so much I ended up buying it in 2001. Just in June, just prior to September the 11th. The outcome of that was we had big American clients. We'd launched E-Trade, the world's largest online broker. And I've blighted your life with Red Stripe Lager and Ford Sierra and Classic FM and all these Boots Opticians and Argos, and they're all brands that I brought to market over the years. But
wow.
You had a big American client base, which of course just stopped spending post September the 11th, when people unfortunately flew airplanes into buildings. So we then, as a team of 35 of us, decided to reconfigure the way marketing was delivered to the then client base in 2002. And we embarked on a 6-month journey to reconfigure everything and really understood. And we had 35 of us working on it. And that job was completed, Carla, 7 years later in 2008, 2009, by which time I'd become a professional speaker. I'd written my first book. And one of the big conclusions of that was you didn't need a fancy 6-floor building in central Clerkenwell with 35 staff in it. Actually, you could move everything to the internet. So we spent a year moving everything to the cloud. And then in 2010, I started the Brand Bucket Company, which services clients using an entirely outsourced model. So I provide a full service across the piece for clients, leading the strategy, leading all the creative briefing work, but then that's all executed by people external to this organization. That was 12 years ago. I'm still doing that today. Today, I am a mentor to 17 business leaders. I sit on the board as non-exec director on 4 businesses. I handle probably 5 or 6 corporates a year in terms of enabling them to completely become brand-led. And I spend 25% of my time on pro bono work.
Wow.
Now, that pro bono work is probably why we're speaking right now, because I'm doing a number of projects. I'm a founder freeman of the Company of Entrepreneurs, which is a livery movement in the city. That's all very pomp and ceremony. And then I'm been raising money to build a school in Uganda for young students to get to school, because there's still a problem there. And then probably the most interesting of all, just over a year ago in December 21, I helped co-found a charity specifically for Black business owners with mental health challenges. So,
I mean, that was a resume like I have not heard in a very long time, Barnaby. That's an incredible sense of just achievement and accomplishment. I can't even imagine how that has colored your life experiences. You've seen so many things, met so many people. And I think my question, and I love that you raised that your last kind of like probably the most prominent part of what you're doing now with the pro bono is your founding of Tenacity Academy, and this is going to be my kind of question leading into what we're here to discuss today is, how did you first become aware of issues with regards to diversity, equity, inclusion? being a founder of something that is so important, and it's a buzz conversation right now. And I don't say that in a way that's condescending or even novelty, but for the first time, I think it's with regards to ethnic minority business taking a bit of a forefront is a real conversation that is pushing to the forefront right now. How did you become part of this conversation?
Well, it's a story, as are many things. So 15 years ago, I found myself at a networking event in Liverpool Street, of all places. And whilst I was standing there minding my own business, as you do when you go networking, because I was quite nervous about interrelating with anybody, a young lady called Bella walks up to me and says, "I hear you're a marketing expert." And I said, "Yes, I am a marketing expert." She said, "Well, I'm looking for a marketing mentor." And I said, "Okay, fair enough." And she said, "But I have a test for you." She said, "Did you know that Santa Claus wasn't originally red?" And I said, "Yes, it's interesting you should say that." I said, "Yes, he was originally green because, of course, Santa Claus was a grand elf, and elves wear green. And it was only Coca-Cola that changed the color of Santa Claus using a piece of artwork from an artist in the late 18th century, which they'd used as their thing. And if you look at the Coca-Cola truck, that Santa Claus piece of artwork is still on it." Yeah. And I said, "No, interesting enough, I've included that in my book," I said, "which I happen to have just published." And she said, "Right, you're my marketing mentor." Anyway, so therefore the die was cast. And so I started mentoring Bella. We would meet probably ideally every couple of months for a couple of hours in a place called Club Quarters in Northumberland Avenue. And we would talk about this. And she was really strong in networking and a great presenter, and managed to link law firms in New York to law firms in London, and it was all going well. And then one day, about 6 years in, she turned up a bit late, and she was a bit down. And she said, "I'm really, really sorry. I'm late, but I'm not feeling too good." And I said, "Oh, okay, well, that's okay. Don't worry. You know, I've had a nice cup of coffee. What, nothing too serious." And she sort of paused, and she went, "Well," she said, "I have to tell you, I've got bipolar, PTSD, and childhood trauma." So I sort of looked at her and I went, "Oh, wow," as you do. 6 years I've been working with her. I said, I'm normally quite good at judging characters of people. It's been my job for all my career. I said, how come I've never noticed that before?" And she said, "Well," she said, "to be honest," she said, I you wouldn't know because I only come and see you when I'm in my up phase. And if you know anything about bipolar, it has big ups and big downs." And I said, wow. And I was really quite stunned, Carla, to be honest. And so I said, "Well, why have you never told me before?" And she said, "Well, we don't." I said, "Sorry?" I said, "What do you mean we don't?" And she said, "Well," she said, "black people don't talk about mental health." I said, "Oh, hold on. That's a bit of a sweeping generalization, isn't it?" She said, no, it's all related to generational trauma." I said, "What's generational trauma?" She said, "Well, it all links back to the slave days." And I said, "Whoa, no, stop. Hold on." So I asked her to part the mentoring session that day and said, "Okay, you're going to have to teach me about this. I have no idea what you're talking about." She said, "Well, we've talked a lot about supporting black businesses and how they fail more often than white businesses and all that sort of thing." And that's, she said, because there's a culture that we black people don't ask for help. And I said, "Oh, okay, hold on. What's going on here?" She said, "Okay, it's really very simple." She said, "If you're a slave and you don't know what you're doing, and you admit that to the slave master, they beat you. So we as a culture we're very careful about how we ask for help, and if we do at all, because we know, there's this thing." I said, "Okay." She said, "But if you've got a mental health condition, you're killed by the slave master because you're of no use to them." She said, "So as a culture where I come from," she said, "we don't talk about mental health at home. We don't talk about it in the church. We don't talk about it in society. It is swept under the carpet." And I said, "Okay." And by this stage, I'm completely thinking this. I hadn't even imagined this was going on. anyway, so we carried on, and I said, okay, I need to learn about this. So I started learning about Black history and Windrush and all these sorts of things, and I started to educate myself on whether any of this was true, or whether it was appropriate, or whether it was just her view or her and actually what you discover is this is a real thing. And we're sitting now on, a second generation Black community, born in Britain, grown up as British, 2 British parents, born in Britain. There's the fact that there's still this latent generational trauma kicking through. It just, I don't know, it somehow hurts me in some way. I can't, I just, it doesn't seem fair. And so we carried on working together. And then about 3 years later, Bella said to me, what you've done for me is amazing. I really would love other people to benefit in the same way. I'd like to start a community interest company that helps Black business owners with mental health challenges. We can blend the two things together. We'll use your expertise in helping businesses go from startup to major corporates from a brand point of view. I'll use my connections as well, her speaking skills, her story. We managed to get her I managed to get her to admit her story in public. So she became the face of the Samaritans and the face of the Bipolar Association.
So she is comfortable sharing her story publicly.
Well, she is now much more comfortable, yes, than she was obviously originally. And so in December 21, we managed, after a couple of years, to get our act together and get registered as Tenacity Academy, as you mentioned earlier. And we are sort of a year into that journey. Interesting enough, we had Christmas lunch just before last Christmas, and we were sat in a pizza place on Marylebone Avenue, near opposite the British Library, and she said, she said, there's something I have to tell you. She said, and I've known her for 15. She said, that my grandmother and my mother told me not to tell you about my mental health condition and I said, but why? And she said, because they said the white man will leave you and you won't have his support anymore. And I just think, this is 15 years into a relationship and this is new news to me. Now, bear in mind, a lot has happened in the last year and we can touch on that, I'm sure. But, and I go, and what do they think now? And she said, no, they've completely turned round and they have a different view of things. And I said, oh, that's really, really fascinating. So it's relatively simple to get people to think differently and to look at things in a different way. So, something happened to me a year ago, which then made me feel that, maybe there's a role for, what we're touching on here. Maybe there's a role for me to I don't know, provide a bridge between those that do understand and those that don't understand. And I don't know.
Yeah, I think that really goes towards my next question. And thank you so much for sharing. Just, that is a remarkable story in so many ways. And I think I want to focus, really on what was happening to you in that process of becoming a bridge builder. You found yourself in an allyship space. Is this what you ever saw happening to you along? You've spoken about your extensive history with how you've built, your life within the marketing space and in the business world. Did you ever see yourself occupying the allyship space in the way that it's one thing to see or perceive ourselves as an ally? Yes, I support those that might not have the same privileges that I do, or opportunities that I do, or background that has afforded me, an unfair advantage as a start in life. But here you are finding yourself walking next to another individual who it's been a blessing, I imagine, to be able to walk and build things with. Did you ever see yourself as an ally before? Like, what shifted for you? Whereas this became something that you felt, I needed to take up this cause myself?
Gosh. So the answer is, of course not. No, I mean, at no point, because I didn't realize it was a thing. You just work with with anybody and everybody, and I've been very, very fortunate. I've launched over 457 brands worldwide. They've got all sorts of different people associated. I invested in a gay bank many years ago when we launched in Gay Pride in Hackney Marshes. I mean, how far has the gay community come since having to do it in Hackney Marshes? You know, and so I really feel my energy is best spent when I'm supporting somebody or a concept which is going to make a difference, going to improve the quality of life of everybody. So I've never really thought about why allyship, but the tipping point to even get to this phrase, I mean, let's be quite clear about this. You know, it's a relatively new phrase in my world. Yeah. So I don't know whether it's a relatively new phrase full stop, or whether, you know, as time moves on, hopefully for the better. Started when our first event at Think Tenacity was we were given a grant by Greenwich Council to run an event for Black people to talk about mental health. So strategically, what the charity does is we run events to get Black people into a room just talking about mental health, because we think that's the start point. Break down the barriers. If they then happen to be in business and all that sort of thing, we can develop the relationship with them further. But let's get people into a room. And one of the things that you suddenly discover is that even if, as a Black person, you get to admit that you've got a mental health challenge, and bear in mind, these are horrible statistics on average, it takes a white person 8 years to get treatment for a mental health condition. 8 years, right? For a Black person, it's 20 years. Now, hold on. Okay, these are scary stats. Yeah, and that doesn't seem right. Doesn't seem fair. And why is that? It's because even if you get to a point where you've broken from your community rules, you've overridden generational trauma, you've said, actually, I'm going to go and get some help, there are no Black therapists. So you end up sitting with a white therapist, and of course you're immediately put off because the concept of what we're talking about doesn't resonate, because they're probably very medical, they're very, very qualified, they probably don't see any difference, and yet there is, because, you know, it's about understanding. So anyway, we're on the first event. We have found 2 Black therapists to talk about, I think, depression and trauma. I think we had to talk about, and there's a good attendance record. It's all on Zoom. And Bella says to me, obviously, can you join, but please, can you not switch on your camera? And I sit there for a minute. I go, okay, that kind of makes sense. That makes sense. I won't switch on my camera. So I joined this Zoom call. We've set it all up. Blah blah. We've got some really great help on the charity, and I'm sitting there, BW on a screen, blah blah. I'm just sitting there and I'm listening. Anyway, this thing kicks off, and they hammer white people. Oh my goodness, right? I mean, it goes off straight away. I mean, we've got people who've joined it. We've got people who were one street away from Grenfell and saw people, you know, perish in windows and things like that. So they're seriously in a difficult place and stuff like that. But they are saying it's all down to, you know, the white culture and this, and they're put upon and everything. Anyway, this goes on solidly for 2 hours. Yeah. And we get to about 1 hour 55 into a 2 hour session. And Bella says, I've forgotten to introduce you to Barnaby. Now, in the spirit of what had gone on for 2 hours, I'm waving at my camera. I appreciate it's not on, right? Saying, no, don't introduce me. It's not going to.
Please don't. Yeah.
Please don't. Anyway, so somebody then asked a question, which was, so I'm relieved of the need to switch my camera on. And with 1 minute to go, Bella says, I've forgotten to introduce Barney. Barney, please switch on your camera. Co-founder of Think Tenacity Academy, CIC, blah, can you switch your camera? So I switch my camera on and I go,
Did a pin drop in the room?
No. So I just switched it on and I said, I know what you're all thinking. How could someone so old be so good looking?
Oh, right? I love that.
All right, okay. Anyway, so everybody reacted exactly the same way as you've just done, right? Bear in mind, it's been a very intense thing. Yeah. And then what ensued was something that I hadn't even imagined would happen. Is then the session got extended for about 20. A few people left on time, but a lot of people extended on and started to say, we are really grateful that there is somebody who is white involved in what effectively is a black run organization. We think that's really, really important. And I asked a few questions. I said, is that true, etc., etc.? Are you just saying that, all that sort of thing? And they said, no, it genuinely isn't, because there seems to be this gap between the perception of the black community and the perception of the white. There seems to be a gap. There doesn't seem to be any crossover. And actually, when on reflection over the last year, I've looked at that in terms of women in business, the Irish versus the Northern Irish versus the Southern Irish, being Jewish, you suddenly realize that actually what we are very good as humans at doing is we collaborate with our own. We create these mini ecosystems, these mini bubbles, and we kind of entertain ourselves within that, and we give ourselves confidence, but actually it becomes completely isolationist, and there's no way out of the bubble. And then the bubble gets even more vigorous and more effervescent, but actually it's still being ignored by society at large. And so I suddenly, and I think that was the first time I heard the phrase white allyship, which meant nothing to me at the time, because it seems to be quite.
It's also a military term, isn't it? I think historically speaking, when we hear about allies,
yeah,
it's about, when we even thinking about the Second and the First World War, we were the allies to France, or the allies here and there. And it's interesting that, even as you say, like, it's a modern term, but in principle, I understand kind of like the concept behind it, and that is standing with, supporting with others. And I think for me, I still struggle, and again, this is a language thing to kind of mill over, because the indication is that what we're engaging with regards to these nuances within diversity, inclusion, those that are marginalized, is that this is almost like a war zone. And what a shame that is.
Yeah.
And as positive as the idea of being an ally, in terms of we see the concept of like we stand with, it's also like we are kind of illustrating that there is an environment about what kind of like frames the world of DEI in some way. And it sounds a little bit more, what's the word, either confrontational or a little bit hostile than maybe I think we want it to be. But it is an environment that is kind of has offshoots of these kinds of responses in between, people trying to navigate how to move forward in a space that unifies people.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. But I think I mean, listen, I'm well early in this journey. Even if I choose to carry on with it, I'm super early on it. So I'm not sure my thinking's fully formed. But I think allyship is about improving a society so it works better, and therefore it requires movement on both sides. It's not a one or other. It's not a I think everybody needs to move towards a common goal where both parties are working together for it's a 1 + 1 = 3. And I think I would love to help more people understand that they can be a 1 + 1 = 3, that there's a way of doing that. And perhaps allyship is the plus in the 1 + 1, and therefore the outcome is a 3. I don't know. I'm thinking this through as I work it out. I'd love to be part of a movement which just says, you know what, this world is so much better if we all find ways of getting on, and enhancing each other so that we get more out of it. And I think that's what, for me, allyship has to be about. As a concept, it's a combination. Now, the fact that it's called white allyship means that I'm placing the pressure on the white side of the white one instead of the black one, if that makes sense.
I think you've said so many amazing things just in your little kind of commentary there in response to my prior question and statement about allyship and its place. Firstly, I love your illustration about, it's the 1 + 1 is supposed to equal 3. I think we really underestimate the impact and power of influence that can be created just when there is a sense of unity between two different parties coming together to join forces for, a really noble cause or a helpful cause, an important cause, like what you're saying. And secondly, I really respect that you said, like, I'm new to the journey and I don't have everything what it takes. I don't think anybody does. And I think regardless of where we might be standing within the whole picture of what allyship means, because all of us are occupying intersectional spaces, it's not very linear. And we need to really get rid of that, because that just continues to create boxes of people separating from each other.
Yeah, I agree.
But at some point, in some way or form, I have privileges or I have intersectionalities that allow me an opportunity to raise somebody else in a way that they may not be able to. And I rely on someone else to behave like that and do that for me in whatever else I may be aspiring to. And I think your example there just really illustrates, like, we all have a part to play. And recognizing what's my role. And I know you mentioned quite plainly, and I really respect that. It's like, my role is to put pressure on the community that I represent, who happen to look like me, have, occupied spaces like me. This is the part we play, not waiting for somebody else to come to me to begin to start to build that bridge. And that is something I think and concept, and I respect that you see that in your lane, that's what you're doing. But I feel none of us are exempted from really partaking of, adopting and fostering that principle regardless of where we are. So I really love what you say there. And I think that really kind of helps me out with my next question, in terms of, if someone, and I'm hoping many people will come across this conversation, that if someone was to look at your example, and they see that you may represent them and they don't know how to do that bridge thing, they haven't met someone along the way that came to them, like you've had your experience with your co-founding partner, and that mentorship relationship blossomed into something more because you were willing for it to lean into that direction, and it created like a new opportunity for you to walk in shoes of allyship. But for someone else that wants to but doesn't quite know how would you encourage them to kind of take those steps?
So again, I don't come from a place where I'm holier than thou and I've kind of got the formula and all that sort of thing. So I think,
and that's totally fine. We just want to know what would be your thoughts, because, like you said, we can only go as far as what we know. So that's totally fine.
So I think the first thing you've got to be is you've got to be bold, and you've got to identify your own personal purpose. Yeah, you've got to have a belief structure, and you've got to be bold, and you've got to stick to your belief structure. I think this isn't about following; this is about leading. So, therefore, if you're a leader in an organization, or you're just in a community or whatever, you've got to be bold and say, "Listen, I have seen a better place." And then what you've got to do is you've got to, I think, certainly this has been true for me, is you must educate yourself.
Yeah.
There is no room for opinion. I think what you've really got to do is you've got to educate yourself and find out and listen. I think then the second thing is educate yourself and then listen to see how well educated the person that you're working with, how educated they are, and then I think the final thing is, particularly for actually all of us, is you must own your privilege, because I don't want to believe a society is full of people who are dog eat dog, just doing it for themselves. I genuinely believe that we believe in family, and we believe in society, and we believe in village, town life like that. We believe in our country, we believe in our religion. It doesn't matter whatever you believe in, and you're doing that at an altruistic, community, collaborative way. So but inevitably there will be things that that you've learnt, that you've experienced, that in combination makes you unique, and that's your privilege. That's what makes you unique. It's not, nobody, no egg gets to choose its sperm. You know, it's kind of, it doesn't work that way. And at no point do you know, and you don't choose where you're born. But, you know, if you've been born in the West, you know, the privileges of that are just mind-boggling, and you have to own that and recognize that that doesn't necessarily work for everybody. So I think it's that it's educate yourself, have a purpose, be clear on your own purpose, and be bold, and then own your own own your privilege, and wear it with pride, and but don't use it as an abuse tool. You know, and that's the thing, because the moment you do that, or you assume you're better than any other people, you're not better than anybody else. They will know one thing that you don't know that makes them better than you in that instance. So let's just make it that we're all kind of, you know, coming from the same place with the same, and the thing that differentiates us are our experiences and our knowledge and all that sort of thing. And I think if you use that lens to look at everybody and anybody, then what you'll see, I think what you then see, or this has been my experience, what you see is talent that's being held back for some reason or another. And then I think what you can do is sponsor that talent and cheat the system on their behalf. Yeah. And give them a lift up. Yeah. Because you're in a different place. If you can see that, then give people a lift up. And I think if you do that sort of thing, then surely the world has got to be a better place for, you know, and if you make a difference to one other person, and they make a difference to one other person, you know, over time, you know, maybe at some stage.
And I agree with that so much. I think we underestimate in terms of, if I have the opportunity to raise someone else up because of the position I'm in,
yes,
we don't really how massive an impact. And I think this goes back to your wonderful illustration of 1 + 1 can equal 3 or 3 million, because your should I say ownership of your privilege and ownership of, I also have a responsibility to be a gatekeeper to enable someone else, could really open the door that will benefit not just you, but possibly many others. And to feel that we might be someone who's a gatekeeper for great success, for such a massive impact, or someone that actually muffles that's quite a big thing to contend with, isn't it? To consider.
Absolutely. Oh, it's exhausting. Listen, Carla, it's exhausting. It's exhausting.
But do you know what? I think I would never want to, and I think you're right in terms of, I like you have got a lot of belief still in humanity, and we have a belief that life doesn't have to be dog eat dog world. It doesn't have to be just about self. It does. We can be enriched when we are based on looking at creating an environment and a space that not only benefits us, but generations after us, generations around us. And I think there's a lot more people that are inclined to believe that still. I'd like to hold on to that just like you. So I think we're aligned with that. But even outside of that, based on that principle, if we were to just allow ourselves to be that person, or to be someone who is willingly choosing, I have power, therefore, to raise someone else up with the little that I can contribute or deposit into the life, or open a door that nobody else can, or invite them into the room where no one else might be handing out invitations to that particular community or that space. If I can do that and it has incredible results and impact, then do you know what? It's so worth it. And that could be one moment that could change so many things. And I love that's kind of been the presentation that you've shared with us today of your concept of allyship. And I think it's so encouraging. We're coming to a bit of the end of the conversation. I'm just so excited with all of the things that you've shared, so much to ponder on there. But I just wanted thoughts for yourself, someone who is, and I love just how much you've been so open, and the humility has been really sincere and authentic in terms of, you've alluded to this is an ongoing journey. And for someone at your stage, with the amount of education that you've already submitted yourself to learn and absorb, you know, what are your hopes as an individual about what D&I looks like, say, within the next 5 years and then the next 10 years? What would you like to see come of this? Or even particularly coming of people joining, you know, from your community in this walk towards a better place? What are your hopes for that?
Cool. You ask some hot questions, don't you?
I'm really clear. I really try. So this is good to hear that it's working.
Okay. So I guess my immediate reaction, I think it would be wonderful if the term DEI was never used again.
Right.
Because it was not necessary.
And it was very normal.
And it was, and actually people didn't even think about it. They just go, I don't why, what, you know. And to a certain extent, I look at what's happened in the gay community over the last 20 years that I, you know, which is when we started the bank ago. You know, that I don't want to say it's not about normalization. So I don't want to use phrases like that. I want it to be about acceptance. And I want so first of all, I don't want. I'd love to imagine there's a world where that sort of phrase isn't pertinent. It's not being used. Now, I also believe that to be true of women in society and in business. I want them to be on exactly the same footing as anybody else who has the same competency. I have 3 daughters. I want a world where they can be who they want to be, and they're not, you know, they don't discover they're being disadvantaged by less pay than their male colleagues. And I can't get my head around any of that. So I think that's that. But I think there's I learned a phrase at school which is called hybrid vigor. I don't know if you've ever come across it, but it's where
I have not. What does that mean?
So it's a genetic thing, as I remember it, and I don't remember much from school because it's so long ago. But it's where you combine two genomes, and the outcome is a much stronger genome. Yeah, so it's hybrid vigor. And I mean, the reason why I believe this, I have to tell the story. So I'm obviously very white, middle class, middling. I grew up in the Cotswolds, blah, blah, blah. I went to a school, Chipping Campden Comprehensive, no black people in there. But my first concert when I was 16, my parents allowed me to go to a concert, was at the Leicester de Montfort Hall, and was the Specials, Madness and Selector on one bill, right? And they were, and this was in November 1979. I remember the date exactly. And it was a thing called Two Tone. And I had an out of body experience at that night. I mean, there were birth of my children, Chelsea winning the FA Cup for the first time. There are very few things that have happened to me in life where I just, and the energy of this combination of black and white was just mind-boggling for me at the time. And okay, so I was open to influence. I haven't been to any other concerts, etc., etc. Maybe if I'd end up at a heavy metal concert, I'd have long hair and, you know, whatever. Whatever. I don't know. This is what happens. But my brain was then wired to go, I don't understand why there's any difference. Why skin color or these sorts of things would make any difference. And of course, it isn't as simple as that. And I think we oversimplify all of that. It's about culture. It's about generation. It's about all of these things. And of course, as you get older and wiser, you travel the world. And, you know, I got engaged in Jamaica and, you know, all of those sorts of things. You know, you realize that where you're at is just no comparison to anybody else. Doesn't matter who you are. But actually, that uniqueness is something you can bring together. So I'd love in 10 years' time for human beings to just go, you're a human being, I'm a human being. I have a horrible feeling that there are bigger issues than even this, which is climate change and the way we are trashing the planet. And what will happen is the divisiveness of 90% of the wealth belonging to 1% of humanity and all that sort of thing. That will cause immense friction, and there'll be kind of a sort of a civil war against civil people. You know, it could be mad, and all this will play into
just some form of implosion. Because
and actually, I guess what I would then hope is clearly not every human being is going to die out, but maybe a lot will. Right, the ones that are left have no concept of what DEI stands for, what it was about, because they're just survivors. They're in it together. It doesn't matter where you come from, what here. It's about working back together and building a society which every member of that society feels welcomed, honored, valued, and makes a contribution and all that sort of thing. You know what? You made me go all fluffy. And I have to say, I'm not a fluffy guy in any shape or form. And people who will see this and go, he must have been taking something. What
Not at all. It's such a privilege, though, because I think we need to hear the authentic kind of view of what people really desire, especially on really important things like this. I think it's really sad that you feel like people assume that this is a fluffy moment, but actually I think that's the heart of many people, and it will be more of that is actually needed for us to see some change. Because if we're not really, I think a lot of what you've described, these are heart issues. If I can connect with my fellow human being, we can resonate with each other. We'll find more in common than seeing things that are kind of like separating us through rather than our differences. And even though there is space, and like you said, there's nuance, there's culture, and there's so much vibrancy and wonderful things in that element. We don't want to lose that. But in terms of the things that create friction and divisiveness, like if we can get to the place that we find that kind of connection that is based on our humanity overall, like we will probably be able to be a lot more effective at living much better lives that everybody can benefit from, not just one group over another. Indeed. Barnaby, it's been such a pleasure having this conversation with you. I have been blown away just by your honesty. I just want to thank you for your transparency, and for someone else who's on the other side of working towards what, unity in humanity is kind of trying to move towards. I just appreciate your story. I really value your story, and it's been such a privilege to have the opportunity to amplify that here with our Connecting Conversations.
It's been a pleasure. You've taken me places I hadn't expected to go, Carla. So good on you.
I'm very pleased to hear that. That's wonderful. Barnaby, thank you so much for joining us. If this is your first time joining us for Connecting Conversations, make sure that you follow us on our YouTube channel and, of course, website and our social media platforms. Keep yourselves tuned. More great conversations to come in some of our upcoming episodes. Thank you so much for your time, Barnaby. God bless.